Live at ccsummit in Toronto and virtually connecting to points all over the place. I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College, and I'm your virtual buddy for this session. And we're connecting with Alan Levine, Helen DeWard, and folks in Toronto. Would you introduce yourselves?
All right, we have a lot of people here, and I'm actually going to get out of the way so we can let the more important people talk. But I'm Alan Levine. It's great to be here at the Creative Commons Summit. And I'll let Laura Hilliger introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Laura Hilliger. Here I am.
And Doug Belshaw.
Hello, I'm Doug Belshaw.
Kind of shadowy there in the backlit.
No, thanks.
Hi, I'm Clint Lalonde.
And
Terry Green.
all right. So everybody here is asking me, what are we doing? So I'm actually going to get out of the way so you guys can be a little more centered.
And let's introduce our virtual friends. Can we start with, I'm just going to go, my lower third is actually in alphabetical order, so I'm just going to go across from left to right if yours is also. Brian, you want to say hi?
Hello, Brian Lamb. I am in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada, at Thompson Rivers University.
Graham?
Graham Steele from Glasgow, Scotland. A big fan of open things and a big fan of the Creative Commons.
Grant?
My name is Grant Potter. I am an instructional technologist working with the University of Northern British Columbia.
Greg? Finishing up the G's.
I'm Greg McVeary, and I am in Connecticut and work at Southern Connecticut State University.
Mark?
Oh, hey, Doug. That was just Laura. I didn't know they let everybody in.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, I'm retired and a California Community College student at Berkeley City College.
Awesome.
And Tanis?
Hi, I'm Tanis. I'm in Vancouver right now, and I'm from the Justice Institute of BC, known as the JIBC most of the time.
Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking some time to find out what's happening at the Creative Commons Summit. Toronto folks, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're learning?
I've literally just come out of the WikiEd meeting. It's still going on actually, so I came out, and there's been some really interesting work. I think a lot of us in this conversation and listening in will be aware of over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, people starting to use Wikipedia in academia and using it with students. And what the great news is now, that's not just anecdotal evidence. They've got some real hard data which they're ready to present about how it improves, not just it has outcomes for Wikipedia, but also has really good outcomes in terms of student motivation, instructor happiness, real focusing on things like getting biographies of women on Wikipedia kind of longer, not just stubs anymore. So some really exciting stuff coming out of there. I was really excited.
Yeah, I also just left a session. It was the Faces of the Commons. So Creative Commons just did a bunch of research with affiliates all over the world and trying to talk to people in their hyperlocal context and sort of understand what do they actually want to work on in terms of the Creative Commons movement. So I don't know if anybody online has heard, but Creative Commons is actually doing a bit of a restructuring in terms of how the network is structured, and they're trying to make it so that the movement is less from Creative Commons headquarters down and more from affiliates up. In terms of like, what does this movement actually work on? What kind of issues are they going to address? So the Faces of the Commons was the research that spurred that reorganization. And I just came from a session where they were talking about how interesting it was to hear that all of the things that Creative Commons was kind of saying, this is what we're working on, most of the time in different countries around the world, the issues were very different, and that's the themes that came from the top down is not what they actually were working on. So really interesting research happening there. I'm looking forward to actually seeing the research because it's kind of difficult to imagine just based on what people are saying in the session. So.
Clint?
I just came from a kind of a regional specific one with Michael Geist and Ariel Katz talking about copyright in Canada. It's been 5 years since the new Copyright Act came into effect in Canada in 2012, which brought in things like fair dealing, educational use, and made some pretty significant changes to the copyright law. It's been 5 years now, so there's a legislative review coming up in 2017. So I was just trying to get some background on that and seeing what kind of issues might come up in that legislative review, finding out what kind of pressure that publishers, Access Copyright are putting on, the lobbying efforts that they're putting on government to get changes made in the 2017 review, which will probably take a long time. It'll start at the end of 2017, but we'll probably continue on for at least a year and a half. But that's the session that I was in this morning.
And you were in that one I was in, Terry, right? You want to describe that one?
Sure, yeah. Hi, I was in a session called Copy Wrong. Alan was there. It was very global. 2 guys were calling in. They were Portuguese, but they were calling from Finland. And there was performance artists and lawyers talking about copyright, and they have a performance art piece called Copy Wrong. I'll put the link to their site, but they were there's a performance art piece about how to use copyright.
It's interesting. It's like, how do you copyright movement?
Yeah.
And so they were recreating this work of art that was like a film concept of someone walking. And so, like, how do you copyright walking? But they run into it as a copyright problem. Right?
After you popped out, we had a discussion of the moonwalk.
Oh, okay.
The copyright
I was
of the
thinking
moonwalk.
of the worm.
Yeah. I'll make sure you can see the
chicken dance. Who owns the chicken dance? Is that
or the hokey
copyright? Is
pokey?
that hokey pokey? Yeah, that could be the next happy birthday.
That's all mine. I'm
the hokey pokey on roller skates.
Who owns that? You got the skates.
That's a mashup, I think.
That's a mashup.
Yeah.
A remix. We did that when I was like 12.
So what's like the vibe of the conference? I mean, it just started, but
well, I'm actually really excited about the conversation around. There's a track called "The Future of the Commons," where everybody here is starting to talk about what does the commons actually mean outside of the digital landscape. So what does it mean in terms of business models? What does it mean in terms of physical resources? How can we as a community claim back some of the things that have been quote unquote stolen from us, like the term sharing economy, which is more like a rental economy, or Uber and Airbnb and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and so the conversation around future of the commons, that's a big part of the reason I'm here, because the communities that I work in are looking at the commons as actually the planet. I'm doing a lot of work with Greenpeace at the moment, so they're thinking about the commons in terms of physical spaces and environment, as well as social issues that we all have to work on together. So I'm excited to see the Creative Commons community sort of take a step outside of the digital commons and start looking at some things that we all as humans share. So that's what I'm most excited about, is that track. It's also where all my sessions are.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think one of the pieces that I'm really interested in is some of the work that you guys are doing around co-ops, because it's something that we've been talking about in British Columbia with Tanis, Brian, Grant, and myself, as a different way of cooperating, different governance model, different structure, different ways to support things like shared technology services. And I know that you guys operate in a co-op model with the work that you do. So
it'll be a year next week, actually.
Can you give a preview of your session?
So I think there's different types of sessions here. A lot of them are like at lots of kind of conferences and summits, a lot of like sharing research and like presenting style things, whereas we're doing a lot more kind of participative, workshop-y kind of things as you'd expect. But next week is going to be International Workers' Day, International Labour Day, and that's when we're choosing to celebrate. But it's about that time that we set up We Are Open Co-op, which is available at the domain which you'd expect, which is weareopen.coop. So we exist to kind of spread the structures and ways of being open, which fits in really well with what we've heard so far at the Creative Commons Summit. And I guess what we're trying to do is to mash up the current real interest in cooperation and the structures behind that and the governance models with the commons and how people are kind of re-understanding and come to grips with what the commons means in 2017. So what are we doing? Well, we're going to try and, you explain what we do.
We're going to play some games and try to make people uncomfortable. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, come on.
It always happens when I'm facilitating. No, we're going to take a look at what does the open movement and the cooperative movement have in common from values and principles. We're going to talk a little bit about the international, what they call the international
principles of cooperation.
Thank you. And try to get people to think deeply about the values that we hold in the open community or in the Creative Commons community. And then we're going to try and figure out how we can bring these two movements a little bit closer together. So Doug and I this year have been going to a lot of cooperative conferences. And we've been sort of the token open source people at these cooperative conferences. And now it's interesting because we're kind of the token co-op people at an open source conference. And so, you know.
Boundary spanners.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, the We Are Open Co-op, we're really interested in creating those bridges between different communities because there are a lot of similarities and we might use different semantics and different words to describe the values and principles that we have, but they're actually very, very similar.
Well, something I wanted to say was in our conversations that we've had over the last weeks, months, years and stuff, you've talked about we're all, I think, here as part of different communities, and that's the way that it just works in this day and age. But I think Laura spans more communities than anyone here. And I think something that you've often said, it's quite frustrating when people are almost trying to do the same work. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, Mozilla is trying to define what open is, and, you know, Creative Commons is trying to define what open is, and Greenpeace are trying to, and to some extent, they need to be aware of each other and come together. But to another extent, you always have to define what these things mean for your particular community and your particular focus, because you can't just take something off the shelf and expect it just to work in your community. So I think it's actually reappropriation and understanding.
I call that remixing for context.
There we go. Then.
Just to, you know, use some nice We Are Open jargon.
My T-shirt says, if you can't see, co-ops are the new black.
Are they available?
This was at the Open 2017 conference in London.
And when I met up with Doug on Tuesday, he was like, "Did you bring your co-ops T-shirt?" I was like, "No."
There's a dress code.
I have a question for Laura and Doug, just regarding, you said you've been going to some co-op conferences in the last little while. I'm just wondering what you've been hearing about alternative governance models like holacracy and some other types of principles for like collaboration and cooperation. Like I've read an article a few weeks about a group called Fermondo, and they have adopted something called, I think it's called Collaboration 2.0, which I really don't care for the name, but they've trying to identify different principles of cooperation that reflect some affordances of technologies and different ways that people have organized themselves for work. So I'm just kind of curious if you heard anything about that in the last little while.
Yeah, I think just kind of as a gloss, we have almost like a default operating system when it comes to capitalism and, you know, kind of very hierarchical models. And so one of the things we're all trying to struggle with at the moment is like, how can we use technology and how can we use like increased understanding of how we actually work as humans to re-engineer situations. She mentioned holacracy there. If you haven't come across that, other people, it's trying to have almost no structure. So like Valve Software and other people, I think Medium tried it for a bit, Zappos shoes, that kind of thing. But I think the interesting thing for me is the process by which you actually try and figure that out is almost as important as what you end up with, because what it ends up surfacing some of the really interesting details of what you're trying to do. So how we structured, well, we're 4 co-founders of the cooperative, and we're currently having lots and lots and lots of conversations about what it would look like to let somebody into our cooperative who actually we don't know that well. So what a lot of cooperatives do is they say, okay, you can freelance with us for a bit, and once you get to this amount of work, then you can apply for entry. And we've been thinking about using badges. So kind of getting to know people better and that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't think that, again, it's like talking about openness. There isn't like a take this off the shelf and see, and it's going to work straight away. It's more like read what people are doing, especially around platform cooperativism, that kind of thing, and then do the hard work. The hard work is talking to each other, figuring things out, building trust, and then trying to write it down in a way which is recognizing diversity and also recognizing that people are bringing different things to the table. And one thing that I just wanted to, one thing I want to point out I talk too much. One thing which was raised which I was reminded of at the Platform 2017 conference a few weeks ago, was a 1970s paper, a feminist paper, about the tyranny of structurelessness, which is anytime you think that you're just removing any kind of structure from an organization, kind of new structures come in, which can actually be worse than what you were, always before. So.
No, I just wanted to address the point of diversity. So I think diversity has to be intentional, right? Like, you don't just open the doors and then expect everybody to come in. That's not how diversity works. People who are underrepresented or marginalized, they don't feel invited in the first place, so they're certainly not going to walk in just because you open the doors. But in terms of the co-op structure and our co-op in particular, we really want to invite, so not just gender, race, age, that kind of thing, but also cognitive diversity. And I think that the only way that you can really do that is to be really aware that that's what you're trying to do, because you don't get along with everyone and people work in different ways. And if you're automatically judging them because they are different from you, then you're not actually giving them the chance to show why their difference is beneficial to you as an organization. So we've had a lot of conversations in the past of how do we actually invite that in, but still maintain the type of culture that we want to have inside of our co-op. So, I mean, we're very young and there's only 4 of us and we all like each other.
Well, you're young, I'm quite old. But
but there is a tension there, isn't there, around the openness model of the co-op and open membership, but also wanting to maintain what makes the co-op work, which is the shared values that people have in there.
So do people do co-ops of co-ops? Kind of.
Yeah, and in fact, we're a member of our organization is a member of a co-op. So there's cooperative technologists, which is mainly it's entirely UK focused. I think it's about 20 co-ops in there. So focused on tech writ large. So we don't tend to do tech solutions. We are building a couple of platforms for clients at the moment, but we tend to focus on like structures and like community and that kind of thing. There was a point I wanted to make about what you were going to say earlier, but I completely forgot my point. This is a good point.
I said something about diversity. Sounded really smart.
For being old.
I think that's what it was. I forgot that. So
there's a principle with co-ops though, around co-ops cooperating with other co-ops and then supporting. It's principles. One of the principles of co-ops to support the work of other co-ops.
So we've been working not only with cooperative technologists. How does that work in practice? Okay, so very, very new. Just set up this kind of network of cooperatives. Hopefully, how it's going to work in practice is we get a client who wants to do something which is pretty hardcore technical. We haven't got that in our well, you could do the start of it, but then we'd want to hand on, for example, the service level agreement or something to someone else.
Sure.
And then they could, like, there's web architects as part of that. And then we just, because we trust them, we've already got a relationship with them. We don't have to do the, oh my goodness, like, do we trust you? That whole kind of that dance. So principle 5 of the 7 principles of international cooperation is working with other co-ops. And the Rochdale pioneers who came up with the whole cooperative movement 150 years ago, whatever it was, they were literally trying to make a whole new society around cooperation. Like, it started with, let's kind of do things with shops in Rochdale, but then it was the world. It was like, a nicer version of communism.
Which everybody loves.
Yeah. Never worked in practice.
Not yet.
No. We've also been working with Educators Co-op out of California. So done some work with them recently as well. Yeah, it's a really, what I particularly like about cooperatives is that you can like live your values as opposed to have to like sell out on your values for the sake of hierarchy or money or whatever. So I quite like that particular structure.
Who's the other? It's you two, Brian Mathers and
John Bevan.
Sorry, should have said John Bevan. So 3 of us were at Mozilla together. Brian's a good friend of ours. He does the visual elements of things. John does love partnerships work. But yeah, we'll be looking for, I think, more members as time goes on.
You guys are quiet.
You have to have one of those pins as a general.
Oh, you have to have one of the special Creative Commons pins. Oh, nice. You got one too?
I got one.
I just don't
Did you?
have it on.
I don't have one.
I don't know if people who are watching this are aware that
I'm busy searching my pins. I don't have one.
I don't know if the people who are participating in this and watch this later are aware that one of the things which we're being given here, I haven't got it handy actually, but it's a book.
Oh,
Coloring
I
book.
got one.
Well, there's the coloring book.
Yeah.
But
Faster.
there's the Made with Creative Commons book.
Yeah.
So
Paul, Stacy,
so
and
this one here,
Sarah.
it's available as a PDF, I think, straight from the Creative
And
Commons
EPUB.
website.
Yeah.
So Brian Mathers, who might be watching this, hi Brian, he did the illustration for this, and he's part of our.
I have a signed copy.
Oh, you have. Yes.
That's how he's making money on it.
Yeah. But it's available, I think, as a PDF, and then this was underneath our seats. Do you want to explain that one, Helen?
This one is called The Women of the Commons. It's Uncommon Women of the Commons, and it's a coloring book. So we can color the women.
Celebrating the uncommon women of the commons.
With crayons.
with crayons.
Well, gang, like they're all muted. I've never seen
So I
just
snuck in
wondering-
at the last minute.
I know.
Hi, I'm Autumn Keynes, co-director of Virtually Connecting. I'm really excited to hear you guys talking about this, and we're going through like a research and kind of strategic planning for Virtually Connecting, actually. And so we've been thinking about maybe turning Virtually Connecting, like what would be the model? What would it look like if Virtually Connecting were a co-op model? We're growing, and you know, there's a lot of different constituents. There's a lot of different players. Sometimes we get conference organizers, or sometimes even ed tech vendors that want to partner with us, and it's just hard because we want to keep our values, you know, and you talk about like being able to still keep yourself, right? Still be able to keep the thing that you love without having to buy into the hierarchy. I think that we're struggling with that a little bit. So it's great to hear you talk about it and to hear that, you know, we're not alone in thinking about this. We actually got tipped off because Brian Lamb, when I was at with Mehabeli in at Open OER 17, we heard Brian talking about it with Jim Groom. And so, yeah, it's something that we definitely want to talk more about and hear more examples of.
I just reiterate what I said before, that it's easy to take kind of traditional hierarchical organization, capitalism stuff off the shelf because that's our default operating system.
Right.
It take a lot of conversation.
Right.
A lot, like we meet every Monday, we have a co-op day every month.
Wow.
And we invited somebody in, and we're part of the wider cooperative technologist thing. There's a tool called Lumio, which is a co-op from New Zealand called N-Spiral, E-N-S-P-I-R-A-L.
I recently learned that they actually, so Lumio is created by a group of people who not only have a co-op in terms of business structure, but they actually live on a co-op farm. And like a commune, basically.
Yeah.
And everything that they do together is all cooperative.
Are they vegan?
Outside of,
Wow.
they're probably vegan.
Do they knit their own yogurt?
I think they might actually have their own yard.
And I have some experience with co-ops from like housing co-ops. I had some friends that lived in housing co-ops, and I used to manage a food co-op back in Ann Arbor. So I've had some experience in that world, but I'm trying to think about like what does it mean to be a learning co-op? Like what would it mean to be an ed tech co-op? Like that's
I think the fundamental thing is the conversation and the openness and the democracy of it.
Yeah.
And just keeping on talking about stuff until everybody's happy. Now the great thing about Lumio, I mean, Lumio discussions can go on forever. Oh my goodness! But if you're reasonably like if you kind of have an endpoint discussion, the whole point is that it's a discussion which is supposed to lead to some kind of voting. So you can vote yes, no, abstain, or you can block it as well. Which means that one person, it's almost like the United Nations where you can block it. They can like one person can just like go, actually no, this is completely the wrong question for this reason. I'm blocking this
it's a
thing.
veto. Yeah.
It's a proper yes, a veto. Yeah, that's right. So that leads to some interesting things, but it means you can't just steamroller things through. You actually have to do the hard work of discussing. Now, with four of us, that's not, and we all know each other, we like each other. Like, we might just block stuff just for a laugh. But, but
Imagine who does that.
Usually it's, it's fine and stuff. And so it's just finding the right tools, but just, it's a conversation. There's no quick, fast roots.
So what happens when it just like spins where it feels like you just can't get out of the cycle?
I take a second vote as a minority.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
I've been sequestered in a jury duty before. It's a hung jury after a while, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just stuck.
When that happens to us, we usually just shelve it and say, okay, let's talk about that next year. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, go on.
any questions from the others in the room?
Yeah, I've got one actually. You mentioned that you guys have been going to a lot of co-op conferences this year, and I'm kind of curious about what whether you're hearing, and I don't know how long you've been sort of following co-op conferences, but do you get a sense that it's shifting in a different direction, or that there's a resurgence of cooperatives, or that it's sort of coming into its own somehow? Like, is there some sort of sense or themes that you feel like you're hearing a lot of around co-ops?
So I was at the Cooperative Education Research Conference in the Cooperative College in Manchester last month, and on 2 or 3 occasions I heard people either say themselves or report in their studies that they found people who were working cooperatively, and often younger people who were working cooperatively in kind of solidarity with one another, but they had no idea about the cooperative movement. And so people were almost theorizing their practice, and bringing that in, which I thought was really interesting. And then Trebor Schultz is saying, I was hoping he was going to come and join us, but he's got a book, what's it called?
To hack and own.
To hack and own. It's about platform cooperativism. So platform capitalism is things like Uber and Airbnb and Amazon and all that kind of stuff. Whereas Fairmondo's already been mentioned, that's a kind of a platform cooperative. One called Stocksy, which is for stock images. So trying to create things which are like big, can compete with the major players, but are also cooperatively owned. So it's not all about venture capitalism and shareholder value and that kind of thing. So that would be the 2 main things for me.
I think part of the reason that it feels like the cooperative conversation has gained some traction in the past couple of years has a lot to do with what's going on at a geopolitical level. I mean, systemically, the divide between the rich and the poor and inequality are really coming to the forefront as people lose everything because of just what's going on in the world. And the co-op movement is an answer to some of the problems that are really being highlighted in our unequal capitalist system. And I think that a lot of people are just tired. They're tired of blindly following the system that they were handed down, and are searching for alternatives, finding those alternatives in history, and trying to rejuvenate some of these alternative movements. I mean, that's definitely happening in, inside of the environmental movement as well. People are starting to realize that the way that they've done business in the past and the way that they've fought for the environment or the ecological movement in the past is actually not really working anymore, because some of their tactics that they've been using for 40 years have been taken over by other players in the system, and those other players have more resources, they're louder, they're richer. So trying to change the narrative, change the story, and change the way that we as human beings relate to each other. And I think that the resurgence of the co-op movement is part of that.
Just quickly, there's a UK organisation called AltGen, which is all about cooperativism for young people. And if you imagine, we've all been sold the line of, if you stick in well at school, if you go to university and stuff, there's going to be a job for you at the end of it. And that's not the case really for quite a lot of people in many sectors. So people working in solidarity, because otherwise they go out, especially in more creative sectors, they leave college, university, and then they're competing against one another as freelancers. So why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just form a co-op or something to join together in solidarity?
That's actually one of my lines, and I'm keynoting a really weird corporate social media conference next month. I'm the token this year. I'm the token nonprofit at this weird corporate social media conference. And one of my ending line is basically we're not in competition with each other, even though that's what we've been taught. We're not in competition with each other, not about the planet, not in business, not in learning, not in life. There's got to be a different way. And just because we were taught to compete doesn't mean that that's what we have to do. So
you all suck out there.
Yeah, I'm totally going to do my mic drop. It's actually really funny because
corporate social media.
Everyone's going to be using the Laura Hilliger gif as just mic drop.
It's actually really funny because the other keynotes, like half of them, Greenpeace is campaigned against, and I really am like, really is they told me we've been running this conference for 15 years, and this is the first time we've ever invited a nonprofit. And I've worked in nonprofit my entire career, and I'm like, really?
That's another good point, actually. The fact that you work both with the co-op and with Greenpeace.
Oh yeah.
And so the fact that, so for example, John is almost working full time now, I think pretty much, but he's still a member of our co-op, doing less work with us. And then, you know, if he chooses to leave or whatever, then he's still a member of the co-op. So it's like almost, you can never know. You get to choose to leave, but like there's, unless it's so long as you abide by the principles, and you're not being a dick or whatever, like you get to,
That's not really
is that principle number 7?
No.
Principle number 7.
Can you get voted off the co-op? Can you get voted off the co-op?
The way it currently stands.
Actually, we've had lots of discussions about that, and we always shelve it for next year as to how that works. So we think yes, but we don't know how, and so we're just like.
And we also have like member buy-in each year. So you can choose. So
everybody comes in the closed tent and drops the bean or something.
Well,
so we should write that down.
But it's just like you learn. So you see what's in the landscape, and then you use those for your own thing as well. So one thing that's kind of we've been discussing. So it's coming up to a year. It'll be easy for everyone to say, "Hey, is everyone in for another year?" And everyone to go, "Oh yeah." So it's not like a huge amount of money, but we're putting in more money into the co-op each as an example of the fact that we're committed to it for another year, and then we're going to keep on doing that. And then there'll be a buy-in for anyone who applies to join us, who meets the criteria and all that kind of stuff. So some of it's quite boring and procedural sometimes, but what you end up with as part of the discussion is figuring out that what you assumed that the other person was thinking is not actually the case at all.
Right. I think one of the other interesting things that I think is interesting about our co-op is basically when we work, if more than one of us is working on a particular thing, we run it through the co-op. So Greenpeace is my biggest client. I work like 3 days a week for Greenpeace, and I don't actually work for Greenpeace, but with them. I'm just gonna go with that route. And I kind of do that on my own. They want me for some stuff. But when we have clients where they really need, both Doug's expertise as well as my expertise, we would take that client and put it through the co-op. So if there's more than one of us, then always through the co-op, and if it's just one of us, then it's usually through our other. Oh, we have a lot of pot. Welcome to Canada.
No, I'm not sure this is the information that people want when they're listening, but just to finish off
recorded in the archive, documented by YouTube.
We have a co-op pot.
So we used to put this up front to clients, like this is our day rate, this is our day rate, and we add on 25% as our co-op part, and explain what a co-op is. Of course, if you're not interested, particularly in the co-op movement, you're just interested in the skills, people are like, you're adding a 25% tax on me? What? So we don't mention that 25% pot, but we do have it, so we keep it, and it's for things like, oh, Laura wants to go to a conference because it's actually going to potentially lead to work or whatever, and everyone votes on, yeah, that's a good thing to do. Our in-person meetups, which are about every 6 months, so we're meeting up in June, is it?
No.
We'll come together. Last time was in London. I think next time will be in London as well. So it just pays for like our hosting and all that kind of stuff as well. So you have
also at the end of the year, whatever's left in the pot is split between members equally, and 51% goes to community-based projects, and the other 49% is divided equally between the members. But we leave a member buy-in. It's a little complicated. I don't know if you guys want to know.
And this
but basically,
this just comes out of discussion though.
There's no profit, is what I'm trying to say. Like as a
co-op,
co-op, we're
not.
Yeah,
like the whole.
All the profits go back to
the workers.
members.
It's not like, hey, how much money can we keep in the?
So that would be a cool problem to have, but.
No.
I'm curious about what about like the official, like, are you guys registered as a business? Are you registered as a nonprofit business? What about like, I mean, it sounds like you're pretty international. Which country do you like base everything in?
Like, don't even start. Don't even.
Am I opening up a whole?
The We Are Open Co-op is a business organized in England. All of the members have their own businesses, and the businesses are members of the co-op. But we are getting rid of that rule because of me. Yep. But I will tell you why. But let's just want to know. Go look at German tax law.
Yeah.
You get really frustrated and annoyed because if you don't speak German, then
I don't.
get it.
So again, this is getting into the weeds somewhat. So there's, in different countries, co-ops either have an explicit legal status, like you can set up a co-op, or the co-op is almost a hack of the existing system. So, for example, there's two different legal forms of co-ops you can start, and you're like, hey, I'm going to set up a co-op. Whereas in England, you set up a private limited company as usual, but then in the articles of incorporation, you put the 7 principles of international cooperation, and you say that you're a worker-owned co-op, and you exist for solidarity and all these kinds of reasons, that kind of thing. So we've had to do that because there is no legal official co-op form in the UK. What was the point? Oh, so when it came to why did we have to have limited companies to then join the co-op, that was almost a way of, there were lots of people who wanted to join our co-op in the early days, and it was almost like, it's easy for people to say, yeah, I'm in for that, and then like not really do any kind of stuff after that. So it was almost like creating a bar, so there was a financial buy-in, and you have to set up a limited company, and some people just didn't make that jump.
I wish.
No names mentioned, of course. Maybe disciplers.
Your daggers.
That's
Aww.
More conversation to come.
Yeah, so German tax law is complicated, so Laura will now be a member of our co-op as an individual as opposed to Zeitapsui Limited.
Yeah, as soon as the lawyers are done.
Yes. But this stuff, right?
Yeah, this is like,
it's just conversation, like that's what it is.
I mean, it's also, we're learning by doing right now, which is a good way to learn. I think everybody here agrees with the learning by doing thing. And I think a really big part of it is again, we're kind of going against what we were taught, like how we were actually socially bred to understand business in the world. Like co-ops are not that, we didn't learn about them in school. We didn't learn how to treat each other. So it is a lot of negotiation. And I think for anybody who's thinking about starting a co-op, you're really just going to have to be open and honest and human and understand that it's not, you're not going to get anywhere by trying to force your opinion. It's negotiation, and it's lots of fun. And there's some great.
My favorite thing is a Monday morning meeting when you're still grumpy. And then
Doug's always really grumpy on Mondays for some reason.
Can I just point out that you're always an hour ahead of us in Germany?
And I'm also really grumpy.
You're on like your 3rd cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's true. Now all 4 of us really love our Monday morning meeting because it sort of sets the tone for the entire week. Yep. We talk a little bit about what we have to do, but it's more like checking in. Yeah, and having it's having a group of colleagues that are really there for you as opposed to there because of a project or because they have the same brand name or whatever. So yeah, cool. Solidarity.
I think we're going to wrap this.
Because we'll talk all day.
No, because we'll listen all day. But you guys can certainly hang around and yak behind our backs.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us. Yay. I hope we said anything interesting. We did, right?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks so much, you guys. This was really informative and great. It was great to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. Thank you.
Interesting. Brian, were you? Oh, Brian left. I thought Brian was about to say something. Grant, you've been putting some great stuff in the sidebar here.
Oh, right on. Some of the stuff that Doug had mentioned I've been familiar with and I'd heard of before, so I had some already in my bookmark, so I thought I'd put them in there.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to have to remember to capture the chat.
Well, dang it. Looks like I came in just as you guys were finishing.
Sorry about that.
That's not your problem. Clearly my problem. Hope it was a good conversation.